Welcome to Mosaic Monday. Today I'm going to be working on a project I started a couple weeks ago. I started Mosaic Mondays on Instagram, and my intention is to stream this live today to Instagram and Facebook. I've been sharing my process in highly edited reels and little videos capturing the best moments of hours and hours of work and editing it down into 1 minute. So I think sharing a little bit more behind the scenes of how my work really comes together would be fun. So I did two on Instagram last month, and I wasn't sure how they were being received, but then in my last studio class I had a couple ladies come in, and Lori and Kathy, hello if you're watching. So they mentioned they had watched the lives and it gave them so much confidence coming into class that they felt they could make the mosaic project we were going to work on together. So that was very encouraging and just motivated me to keep going. So today I've put together a little more intention behind what I'm going to work on, because I've just been kind of winging it, which I'm still going to do. It's going to be very spontaneous and we'll just see where it takes us. But I have a little kind of mosaic Valentine, and I think I'll be able to finish it today. I have kind of an idea of where I'm going to take it, which should be kind of faster moving than my normal little tiny delicate work. So, but we'll see. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Shara, and I'm in Minneapolis. Very snowy here. I'm a mom of three. They're all in school today, so I have the whole place to myself. It's pretty quiet. In a couple weeks, we don't have school, so I've put on the schedule for Mosaic Mondays which dates I will be, because not every Monday is a guarantee. If we don't have school, I will not be live. So I plan to continuously work on a singular project for each live, so you can kind of see the progression, and not each live will be a completion of a whole mosaic, but just working ourselves through the beginning to the end progressively. And if you are new here and you're looking for links to all the supplies and things that I use, I have a really great freebie guide that you can download and have all the links that you need to access. It is in my bio, so if you want the freebie guide, it's linked in my bio. Otherwise, I can post a link in the description after. So I'll just get into it. How about we start? So I'm going to switch my camera. We're going to have a tabletop view now. So this is what I'm working on today, and I've spread out all of my favorite supplies. I think that when you're working with supplies like this, it's impossible to have a bad day. It's just the best ever. So I have my favorite seed beads here and some findings. So these are just some faux pearls, lots of rhinestones in different shapes and colors. So when I'm working, I just like to pull everything around me and just have a little bit of everything at the ready, so that I don't have to get up and walk around my studio and kind of hunt things down when my adhesive is activated and setting up. So I try to pull everything in close to me, but I do end up meandering a little bit now and then. So, but we have some wiggle room, so that's fine. I've been collecting mosaic supplies for a long time, so this wasn't all at once. I'll just do a little scan of my whole table so you can see a bit more. But it's a collection over many years. I started making mosaics over 20 years ago, so some of these rhinestones I've actually had that long, like these ones, for example, I think. But a lot of them are newer too. I'm always replenishing, and especially since I became more of a supplier in addition to teaching, I'm constantly freshening up my inventory. So this is a new chain I recently picked up, which is a bit bigger than I normally work with. I've been working a lot smaller lately with my smaller frames, but it's still a really good size. So I like the chain. The chain is really great for beginners because they're not loose. Beads like this, when they're on a string, they could easily start falling off the string. So with a rhinestone chain, everything's just kind of locked in there, and then you can push them together and pull them back apart. If you need them to work in a space more tightly or fill out a space, you can spread them out. So rhinestone chain is such a great way to get that beaded look if you're not quite ready to start working with beads. And of course you can get it in different sizes, and then there's like a pearl chain too. You have to be a little careful with some of the pearl finishes, but overall really fun. Like I mentioned, I started this heart mosaic a couple weeks ago, and this is what I'm going to work on today. So with the theme of Valentine's Day, I have some loose seed beads that spilt in here, and I have a couple pieces that popped out, so I'm going to repair these spaces that the mirror just came out because I used the adhesive sparingly. I don't want any of it squishing out beyond, so sometimes I have to go back in and just touch things up. So I'll do that first. And this is what the frame looked like before I started. So I design and manufacture these frames, and I'll grab a couple more to share. These are so great for mosaics. They're like a coloring book for mosaic. They have that built-in edge and instant frame, so you can just fill in with texture and color and get right to the fun part. Something that makes mosaics a little bit tricky is when you bring the material to the edge, is how to keep it tidy and keep the pieces from falling off. So this one I did go a little bit up and beyond the edge, which makes these mirror pieces a bit more vulnerable because they are standing up and out. But overall, the mosaic is pretty much tucked in. So a lot of times people ask me why I don't paint or stain my frames, and I have a few reasons for that. One is just aesthetically, I really love how subtle and sophisticated the wood grain looks, and I give it a shiny sealant when I'm finished with the mosaic, and I actually go over the entire mosaic with it. So the sealant I use is called Minwax, and this is our little, in my shop.sharafrank.com on my website, we have a grout bundle, and so it's the finishing materials and tools needed, and we include a little bottle of Minwax, a sponge, gloves, and a little bag of grout. So the Minwax I put on the sponge, and I just sponge it over the entire mosaic and on the frame, and it gives it all just a nice glow and finishing touch. So I usually keep my frames unfinished. That's one reason. And then another reason is that I'm not always sure where my mosaic is going to go. And I think that it's best to seal or paint your frame before your mosaic starts. And I'm not always certain where it's going to go. So if I painted this, let's say purple, and then at the end I didn't want it to be purple, it would be hard to change it. So I just feel like it's a restriction committing to a color before starting. Oops, these pieces I popped out to recut, so I'm going to glue those back in. But so for that too, so that's the second reason. And then my last reason for not painting my frames is because when I'm teaching, I feel that it just looks better and it's easier to follow along when the frame is unfinished. So that's just another kind of random reason, which might not apply to everybody else, but for me it works. If you wanted to paint your substrate, any kind of substrate beyond frames like what I have, it would be best to do that before starting your mosaic, because if you try to paint after your mosaic is finished, you could easily get paint on your material, which could get really messy. So if you wanted to paint a frame like this, you could use acrylic paint. I use a spray paint we do these mini floral classes, and we spray paint those frames, and that looks really clean and nice. There's so many different kinds of spray paint you can get now with chalk paint, enameled paint, all kinds of finishes. And then also just different sealants. It could be a natural wood color. That looks pretty too. So that's the substrate, and like I said, I designed these, and then I have them made by a local company here in Minnesota. I work with these two dads, and they run their own cabinet making shop, and they have the machinery I need for cutting these frames. And we have a small hobby size machine to cut these in my home, in my garage, that we use for our prototypes. But for large quantities, I need a larger one. So they have those, and they cut my frames for me. My frames go through many hands before they reach my customers. They start with me designing, and we go through prototypes, and then they're cut at the shop, and then we bring them back to our shop and we sand them down, and then we pack them. They go through probably 4 people before they reach my customer, and I just love that. There's so much care and intention in every one. Okay, so for my adhesive today, I'll continue using what I started with, and that is epoxy clay. So you can see in here, I tinted it. It's kind of a pink color. And and if you're just joining, I have a supply guide. I'll link that later. And spontaneously, I went over to my shop last night to see if we offered a kit for this project, how many could we supply? So we do have a limited number of kits that we can supply for this project, and I'll tell you how you can order that at the end. But I just need to make sure I see where this goes. But I'm thinking I'm going to use this ceramic flower piece. This is vintage, and I don't know what it was originally used for. I think maybe a little figurine, but it has these loops on the back. Oh, you can pull them right off. They're like little plastic loops, so I'm not sure. Maybe it was some kind of barrette or jewelry piece. Anyway, those popped right off, easy. But I think this might be a fun centerpiece to build from and have kind of a 3-dimensional. I'm thinking of Valentine's Day cards, of how they're lacy and they have dimension, and sometimes they're kind of, pop-up book-like. I was reminiscing about Valentine's Day with my daughter because her classroom is planning their Valentine's Day party, and that was one of my favorite things as a kid growing up, is just baking my Valentine's Day box and planning the little Valentine's Day cards and all the little treats. It's such a fun, tactile holiday. So I think Mosaic is a great way to tie in some of those qualities of the Valentines, the old-fashioned Valentines, with Mosaic Valentine. So that's kind of my idea. The direction for this is just that lacy, old-fashioned, maybe part dessert, kind of candy-like, and then that vintage, just cozy quality of that feeling you have when you're with all your friends and having your Valentine's Day party, or a little tea party or something. So we're using epoxy clay today. Lots of my longtime students know that I used epoxy sculpt for many, many years. These days, the last, I would say 6 or so years, I've been using epoxy clay. So epoxy clay is a lot softer, and it comes in a white and a brown. So I use white, and then I add pigment to it. So that's how I got this pink color in here. And so I'm going to just mix a little marble size because, well, actually, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to mix a bigger amount because it will last an hour after mixing, and I don't plan to be on here longer than that. I need to figure out how to set my camera so it doesn't drift around. I have 2 equal parts of my A and B epoxy clay, and I'm going to mix it together thoroughly. So this takes a couple minutes. You want to mix it together thoroughly because if it's not mixed well, it won't cure. After mixing it, you have about an hour, a good hour of work time with it for mosaics anyway. The first hour is optimal for working with beads and tile and such. So I use epoxy clay whenever I'm using fine, delicate materials. When I'm working primarily with china and bigger, heavy-duty pieces like this one, I'm planning to adhere all of these china pieces down into the wings using thin set we have an adhesive bundle in my shop. So you get the thin set and then a bag of epoxy clay, and diamond glaze is another adhesive I use a lot. So the thin set is what I use for the china. The epoxy clay is what I use for any of the fine delicate material, and then the diamond glaze, that's another thing, but I'll demonstrate that later. So the epoxy clay I mix, and then I add my color. And it's not necessary to add color. If you just want to use it white to keep it simple, that's just fine. But I usually will mix my color in to complement my material. I like to match it up to the color of my tile that I'm working with. Now I can add my color, and I keep a little tin of my paints, and I love finding ways to keep things that we use a lot in fun containers. My paints I keep in this tin. My disposable gloves I keep in this tissue box. So just the things that are always sitting out, I just try to find ways to make them a little bit more special. Okay, so I'm going to use the scarlet red oil paint. That's what I used last time. And there's not really a specific formula for tinting your clay. I just add color until I'm satisfied. So you can't really overdo it, but so I'm usually just aiming for the general idea of the color I want. I don't spend too much time on perfecting the color of my clay. Okay, so this is my mix of clay. I'm just going to change my gloves because I'm going to spread the clay onto my project now, and I don't want the paint from my gloves to get onto my frame, but the paint is pretty well mixed into the clay at this point, so it probably shouldn't transfer, but I also don't want to touch the clay too much right now without gloves on because I like to minimize contact as much as possible. It will leave a residue on your hands that will then transfer onto your mosaic material. So it keeps your mosaic looking a lot cleaner when you wear your gloves when spreading it out. I'm gonna roll a coil of the clay, and I just tuck it right up next to the material I left off with. So it's going right into that seam. And I really like working with coils because I have a lot of control over how deep I'm building it, how thick it is in the frame, and how wide it spreads. I could fill in this whole open area, but since I'm not really sure where this is going to go, I'm not going to do that because what if I don't fill it all in today and I would have to remove all that clay? You have to remove any clay that you don't use because it will dry completely hard. It dries very hard, so you don't want it to dry anywhere where you plan to add more mosaic because it will be completely in the way. Okay, so I got that done, and oh, I forgot to touch up that little spot that fell out. So for touching up this spot, I'm just going to use this diamond glaze. Diamond glaze is an adhesive I've been using more in the last few years. Jewelers use a diamond glaze a lot. It's also a dimensional adhesive. It can be built up like a resin. It's not completely waterproof, but it's water resistant. So they don't recommend it for jewelry that you would be wearing all the time, like in showers or for swimming. I think of our mosaics, these kinds of mosaics, as a hybrid of jewelry and mosaic. Whenever I'm looking at adhesives that jewelers use, I'm thinking about how they would work for a mosaic. Okay, so these little tiny mirrors are super thin. I'm going to take my gloves off. I'm going to use this other cutter. Okay, so the silver Schnitt cutter has a thinner or smaller space between the wheels, so they can cut thinner material. So these mirrors are very thin. This silberschnitt can cut these, where the lip bonnet cannot, because that space between the wheels is much wider. It's not something that happens very often, so I wouldn't rush out to get this just because of that. So I'll drop this one back in that spot where we lost a piece, and I'll let that dry. So you don't need a lot of glue, the diamond glaze. A little bit does a lot. A dot does a lot. And then you can go back in with the diamond glaze and touch up any little gaps. I think of it as a resin. You can use the diamond glaze as a way to fill in any gaps, as kind of a resin, clear grout little treatment. I've been teaching my students to do this, and it's just a quick way to blur. It's like a magic blurring tool. Blurs these little imperfections that may be standing out to you and makes them just blend in, and you can fill in these gaps without having to grout or do anything else. So I really like the diamond glaze for that. And if it doesn't fill in enough the first time, you can go back in and do more later. Just let it dry and then go back and do another layer. Okay, so then for around the next row, I decided I wanted to use these rhinestones. The color is called, it's Alexandrite. It's this beautiful periwinkle purple. And oh, good, Louise. I'm just reading your comments again. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Good. I'm so glad you're spending your lunchtime here. Okay, so these rhinestones are, it's an oval shape. I think it's a 8 by 11 millimeter. And I'm going to use these around the perimeter here. And I'm going to lift them up a little bit so they overlap. They're going to overlap a little bit of the square green, the green square that I put down previously. It's kind of this pistachio. I love anything iridescent. So I'm just going to overlap the edge of those with this rhinestone. So I, of course, noticed these little inconsistencies, and I don't stress about it because I know when I put my next row down, I can overlap the rhinestone on the edge of the stained glass, and it just masks that subtle inconsistency. I'm going to do another coil of clay on top of this one because my rhinestones aren't grabbing. They're just not settling in as well as I want them to. So I'm going to beef this up a bit. So my clay is even overlapping the glass a bit. These rhinestones are a little fussy for the tweezers. It's kind of a shape that doesn't want to be grabbed. Might just have to use my fingers for these. They're that in-between size. Okay, that extra coil on top did the trick, so it's going a lot better. It makes me happy to cover up that spot because I kept looking at that rounded, choppy piece. Okay, so I'm just gonna put these in, and then what do you all think about that kind of 3D center idea? I think it would be fun to do a little bit more something like that in there, but I have a bunch of other things pulled together that would help fill in. So not just this piece, but some other findings, a little collection. And what you see is what you get. And that's what I love about working this way, because so often with the traditional way of making mosaics, we have a lot of guesswork and we're trusting this process and then grouting it at the end, and then it can just go a whole different direction, which can be heartbreaking or satisfying. I've experienced both outcomes when I used to grout everything, and I really like this way of working with the epoxy clay and using it as a grouted look. By tinting it, we're creating a grout while using it as our adhesive. So this is what you see is what we get, and we don't have to do anything else to it. You could grout if you wanted to, but we don't have to. And if you just need a little touch up here and there to have more security, like what grout would provide from the top down, we could use the diamond glaze for that. And it doesn't compromise the sparkle and all the texture that we're building, like how grout can take away the glimmer and the sparkle, especially with beads and rhinestones. I used to grout everything, all beads, all rhinestones, everything. And I loved the way that it made it look antiqued and like it just came up out of the earth. And my work, my aesthetic has changed a lot. I still love those pieces and the outcome, but today I have a different kind of work to make. So I really like this process of using the tinted clay as the adhesive and the grout at the same time. And it simplifies the work too. So I have a whole bunch of these flowers in different colors. And I think I probably wouldn't use the green, but any one of these would work. I'm kind of leaning towards the pink since it's more of a Valentine. I don't know. The yellow is still a contender. Tell me in the comments what you like, yellow or pink. I'll just put this aside and think on it, and while I pull together some other stuff. And then I have a bunch of these ceramic flowers. We could put some of these in, blue and pink. This one's kind of been beaten up a little bit. If it was missing one petal, maybe I would still use it, but it's missing two, so I probably don't want to use that one. Oh, I like this leaf. That would fill in there. I think a lot about textures, and what I love about bringing in these metal components is that it just adds a lot of variety. So we have the pink pearl, and then the stained glass, and the rhinestone, and now we're bringing in some metal, and then the ceramic. This is a matte ceramic porcelain, and this one is a glaze, so it's a bit shinier. And then this flat back kind of cabochon has a pearl look to it. So I'm always thinking about textures and mixing it up. And this, maybe the yellow comes in from this one. And I love anything on a wire. It's just really fun to use because you can tuck it in and just even have it kind of coming off a little bit. I have a few things on wire, and these are some of my favorites. I only have a little bit of these left, and I cannot find them again. I bought these from, if any of you remember, Beads by Sandy. I got a bunch of these from him originally, and they're dwindling away. So I'm just going to pull a bunch of this stuff out and see. Maybe I use some, maybe I don't. And let's see what else. I think that, oh, I do have these flowers on wire. I like to paint these flowers too. If they come white, you can paint them with spray paint, and they look so good. You can customize your own colors by painting anything. You could buy a bunch of brass pieces like this and then paint them to get a look like this. So you can customize your own pieces. I also like these pieces too. I think these are softer. They're not a glass, definitely not waterproof, but that would be really fun to use. Okay, so I'm gonna just dump all this out. And I think I'll just kind of start with my biggest pieces. And then if I have extra space around to fill in, I might just do that with some loose china pieces. Yeah, I like how that's fitting right there. So I'm just gonna start putting bigger pieces of epoxy down to glue them in with. And what's nice about epoxy clay is that you can build it up to, you're sculpting at the same time. So you can build it up thicker and make things stand up higher in some spots than other spots. So if you wanted this to settle in further, then you wouldn't build this up as high. If you want it standing up higher, then you just keep building. You can build the epoxy clay up as high as you want. I love how this fit in there so perfectly. Looks like it was meant to be. There's all kinds of little serendipities like that when you're making mosaics. Things just fall into place. And then this leaf looks really nice like that. I am going to fill in behind it though, because it's going to be hard to fill in any open spaces when it's enclosed. Okay, so that's all filled in. Now I can just start plugging things in, and you can move them around too. So even if I put something in, I don't have to leave it there. So I might just, before really committing, just lay it out loosely. And I love layering, kind of stacking things in, so that works really well there. So I'm going to commit that piece. This one I'm not sure yet, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And then that one looks really good there. So I'm not overthinking it. And I also know I can layer, so I can put something inside of this little flower right there, and that's too big right there. And it matches too much with that one, so I'm not gonna, probably just won't use this one today. If you have little trays of findings and doodads, things that you've saved up over the years and you're just not really sure what to do with them, this is a great project to use them up on. I forget what I have until I find myself in projects like this, and then I start thinking about these random trays of, like, I just have so many. What's nice about trays and big flat pieces like this is that you can just dump all of your random stuff in it and it looks so pretty waiting to be used. So I just kind of have random little collections like this around my studio, and this is just a plastic serving tray that was probably used at like a wedding in the 50s or something, who knows. But I'm looking for smaller kind of pieces right now. This little squirrel, that's cute. So I'm done with that tray, and now I'll move on to this little cup. Has all kinds of fun stuff in it. That might be a good one. These are probably too big. These you can cut in half too though. Oh, this little rose is kind of fun. There's some other sizes in here. And I'm not sure where these came from. I think I found these at CJ. Yes, I found these at CJS sales in New York last spring, and I was so excited because I love these little rosette flowers, but there was only one little bag of them, and they're all a little different too, but those are really fun. Oh, this is a good one too, this bigger one. So I'll probably keep working on this after I stop today, just to really make sure that it's all in the right place. I shared last time that when I have to go pick up my kids from school or take them to an activity, I'll take my mosaic with me and I'll just set it kind of like by the dashboard, not in a place where it's too distracting, but I set it in my car where I can just kind of gaze at it while I'm at a stoplight or drive. Then I'm thinking about it while I'm doing other things and I'm not over analyzing. I think that's just such a great way to be around our work without letting it consume us. Even when I'm doing dishes, I will set it on the windowsill and just look at it while I'm putting things away or washing dishes. Then we can subconsciously be thinking about our work and our choices, our options without over analyzing. Because I think when we've had our nose in a project for hours and hours, it's easy to overthink it and be paralyzed with decisions. So think about ways that you can bring your mosaic with you, especially smaller pieces like this. They're so portable and easy to move around. I'm not sure if this is where it's going to end. I think I need more color in here and sweetness. I feel like the metal is making it look too heavy. I want it to look like dessert and light and lovely, like a Valentine. So that's my plan. I think I need some bigger pieces in here. Like this is looking a little too cluttered. So I'm gonna look for some bigger, fuller pieces to pull in here. But let me know what you think. Okay, so I'm gonna say goodbye. I do have, let me go back to my view. Okay, here I am. I do have a little heart kit listed in my shop. So I mentioned I have a limited number available. If any of you want to do this project, we'll try to make the little findings as close as possible to what I end up using so that you can make one just like this if you're interested. It's in my shop. If you go to my website, shop.sharafrank.com, it's listed in there, the kit. And then if you want the free supply guide, you can find that in my bio too. So thank you so much for joining me today and helping me navigate this new tech setup and joining me for my first live on YouTube. This was super fun, and I'll keep you posted on where the project ends up. I'll share the finished results on all my accounts. So have a great day, everyone.